We believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and I'm super stoked to be with you on a Wednesday evening. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. And for those diehards that tune in every Wednesday, you guys know the drill. Put in the comments where you're watching from. I always want to hear from you. Tonight, I'm excited to have my friend and mentor, Brian Hill, here from the Complete Combatant. And Brian has been a full-time instructor for almost 4 decades in martial arts and currently as a firearms instructor. And as you'll see tonight, he has incredibly unique insights into what holds us back, both on and off the range. Tonight, we'll be diving into what you guys commented on the Defenders Live Facebook group as what you're struggling with the most right now. I'm looking forward to digging into that. But first, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Mr. Brent Hickman, who is in the background. He does not like to be on the camera, but Brent is with us tonight, helping us behind the scenes. Adam's not able to be with us tonight. And Brent is an instructor with us at Defenders USA on that great team, as well as the owner of Haven Defense Company. And so as a partial thank you to Haven Defense Company and to Brent tonight, I want to run this promo of Haven Defense Co. Be sure to check out Haven Defense Company. Brent Hickman and his family own this top-notch holster company in Colorado. All of his products are made in the USA, and their customer service is unbeatable. Don't take my word for it. Check it out on his website yourself. Brent makes sure each holster that leaves his shop is the very best holster he can deliver for you. He's my go-to guy for all things concealment. For 10% off any holster, go to havendefenseco.com and use promo code DEFENDERS at checkout. Awesome. So as a reminder, I just want to make sure you guys know to post your comments and your questions in the chat as we get going tonight. We're going to gather those questions at the end of the broadcast, and you guys get a live Q&A with Brian Hill. So you're going to have access to Brian Hill live in person. So be sure to take advantage of that and ask a question during the show. If it pops in your head, just put it in the chat and we'll gather those towards the end. So super excited about that. Let me see who is popping in here. It looks like Tracy is watching tonight. Hey, Tracy, glad you're tuned in. Somebody on a private group from North Texas, Wendy from Minnesota, Scott from Fort Worth, Troy from Georgia, Scars from Ohio, Kara from Arkansas. Hey, Kara. Looks like maybe Adam is watching from Arizona. He's probably on the couch sick, honestly. He's not having a good day today. Hey, Adam, if you're watching. And Lynn and Kathy from Michigan. Hey, guys, shout out to you as well. So one more thing here before I formally introduce Brian Hill. If you don't want to miss any upcoming shows, be sure to go to defenders-live.com and sign up for the email notifications at the bottom of the homepage. The Facebook group isn't getting quite the reach that I would like when I shout something out. Not everybody's seeing it. So if you want to make sure you don't miss anything, go to defenders-live.com, sign up for those email notifications so that I can get in touch with you and let you know what's going on with Defenders Live. So let's get right into unpacking what's really holding you back on and off the range with first a formal and then a slightly informal introduction of Brian Hill. Brian is the owner and head coach of the Complete Combatant, located in Dahlonega, Georgia. Hopefully I said that right. A Heckler and Koch brand ambassador and endorsed instructor, a presenter at national conferences, and a past owner of Fusion Fitness and MMA until 2020, where the social distancing and all of that good stuff led to him having to close his doors due to all that stuff. Anyway, Brian is a Philster sponsored instructor, an active self protection endorsed instructor, and a retired weekly instructor for ASP Extra. And he's also a certified red dot instructor and endorsed instructor with Scott Jedlinski of Modern Samurai Project. He's also a Rangemaster certified master instructor with Tom Gibbons of Rangemaster and a past TACCon presenter. He has so many more credentials than that too, guys. If you go to the website, it's insane all the credentials that Brian has. He is also a 4th degree black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Karate, a 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo, and a certified MMA conditioning coach. He's also a former deputy with the Fulton County Sheriff's Police Reserve Department, and he's been a full-time instructor since the age of 18 and personally trains every day. So there's the formal bio. I want to add a few things to that, and that is Brian has been a recurring contributor on Defenders Live. He has been a supporter of this show since day one, and he was the first, I would say, big name that I got the courage to ask to be on the show. And when he said that first time that he would come on the show, I was so floored. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. But if you're interested in seeing a treasure trove of information from Brian Hill, you can go to the Defenders Live channel on YouTube or the Defenders USA channel and go in that search bar and type Brian Hill on the channel. There's like a magnifying glass that you can look for and type up his name, and you can see all of the content that Brian has contributed to the channel since its beginning. Every time Brian shows up, either personally or professionally, I've noticed, I have always known him to be passionate about people. And not only that, but brutally honest in the most caring way, but very brutally honest, and cares more about what you need as a student than what makes him look good as a coach. His life story is a remarkable example of strength through struggle. And he came from, and he could speak more to this if it comes up, but from what I understand, came from a significantly dysfunctional and abusive household as a kid, to learning through the years to work through his own weaknesses and struggles and observing keenly the successes and failures of others around him. And now is one of the most sought after coaches in the firearms industry. Personally, Brian has helped me work on getting out of my own way, trusting myself more, and letting go in order to start to get to reach my full potential. And if you haven't attended one of his classes, I really encourage you to look into that. We'll be getting to that towards the end of the show where you can go for that. But because the class that Brian teaches, yeah, it's a shooting class, but you're going to learn so much about yourself. And what will really happen is the shooting and learning to be a better shooter will be a byproduct of learning more about yourself. It's hard to explain unless you've experienced it, but shout it in the comments if you guys have taken a Brian Hill class. What did you learn? I'm sure you guys can relate to the people that have taken one. But anyway, I just kind of had to say that because Brian's been a supporter since day one. He's done so much for me, and I just really want to let you all know that it's a true honor to know him, and I'm really excited to have him back. So with that long soliloquy, let's welcome Brian Hill onto the show. Hey, Brian.
Hey, that's a lot to live up to.
No pressure. That's
That
yeah.
was
Well,
awesome.
yeah, no pressure. I have no doubt that what everyone is struggling with and what everybody talked about on the private group on Defenders Live on Facebook, you will have some sort of direction for. And you're just full of profound information. And I think that only you can really deliver it the way that you do with the years of experience that you have. And I mean, there's just nobody like you on the planet. You're one of a kind. So, maybe everyone else will get to see it the way that I do here. And anyway, all right. So when we asked people on the Defenders Life Facebook group what they were struggling with most, here are some of those things. So be prepared to unpack those things I'll lead you through it here. But some of the comments were, and shout out if you guys relate to this, performing under pressure is a struggle. Discipline and consistency is a struggle. Having patience, managing time, overcoming setbacks. And this one was an interesting one, navigating what information is viable and what isn't, because there's a lot of information out there in the world right now, and trying to figure out what works for you is hard sometimes. So that is just a short list of some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So let's start with this. I was doing the math today. I think I did the math right. Almost 4 decades. Am I right? Of experience coaching professionally.
4 decades.
Yeah.
I'm 58, so that's 40 years.
Yeah. And so you've observed many, many different kinds of people over your life, and you've had many different types of students, some who were successful and some who crashed and burned, and you've seen it all. What are the common traits that you see in high performers across the board, whether it's in shooting or martial arts or any other industry?
There's not an easy, clear answer, but there are some things that really step out with people. Number one is they become resilient. And what I mean by that is they're able to take stress and turn it into something that has them growing. They have a growth mindset. So every setback becomes another learning experience. Every victory comes a chance for them to reestablish things they've learned. They become, over time, anti-fragile. And that means that nothing can really stop them except themselves. They tend to be very passionate human beings about whatever they want to do. And sometimes passion comes it comes and goes for human beings. And when you find it's lacking, what they tend to do is be super curious. They always want to know why things work and how they can do better at it and what's the best practice. They're not very dogmatic in their approach. They have a hard time inside of organizations that tell them it has to be a certain way. And then they have a purpose. Their purpose in training is the why. Why do I do this? Why do I see this way? Why do I aim the gun this way? Why do I do this on transitions? And it's an endless list of questions and curiosity that drives them forward. And the curiosity seems to be a very essential thing. We don't know how it works in the brain. It's interesting. It seems to spread through the entire brain itself, but it's the interest in learning and doing better all the time, which sometimes is sadly lacking for people that lack these things. And the most important thing is they do it because it's their idea. It's something they want to do. They feel a drive to do it. They want to move ahead. And what they eventually become is a better version of themselves, which is the most interesting part of it. We tend to aim at the target, but what we're clearly aiming at in the martial realm is ourselves, and we're creating a better version of ourselves. And while they tend to be highly competitive, the competition tends to be with who they were yesterday instead of just beating the competition. And there's some real negatives to some of these things too. They have to be incredibly careful in it. This can really lead you astray. But I think that's the things that I see that make a real difference. And it's hard to predict. It comes in all sorts of people.
Yeah, that's what's cool about it.
Mm-hmm. I always know when I see their first real, and as a coach, you see the adversity right away. You see the big challenge, you see the goal. And as soon as they're presented with that, it gives you a real good indicator of who is truly there. We all say a lot of words and we like to talk about how we'll rise to the occasion. But what we really do is show ourselves truly when we're under stress. And
Hmm.
it's even more important when we show poorly. We show the worst version of ourselves, but we still continue on. And we
Hmm.
become optimists instead of criticisms all the time, critics with ourselves. Those are really
Hmm.
important.
Yeah, and I would say that all of us have some of those characteristics all the time. But for me, sometimes a certain area is waning, and then other times it comes back to the forefront, like in a wave, an ebb and flow kind of a
Mhm.
thing. But those crucial things that make you who you are never change. I think there are um, foundational characteristics to all of us that never change. I don't know if they probably can over time, but you talked about being unfragile, which I thought was interesting.
Mhm.
So, what do you mean by that exactly? And do you consider yourself unfragile, and how did you become that way, if so?
So, a little bit about my background, really briefly. I grew up, as you mentioned, in a tough household, and they were also involved with a very cult-like religious organization. So there was no medical care.
Mm,
I broke my arm as a young man, as a young kid, and I said it myself. It was a very difficult situation, and it made me very odd, and it made school very difficult. So I never fit in, and my grades really suffered because I didn't have the direction I needed. I needed some structure, and I went to martial arts because I wanted to protect myself from anybody taking advantage of me in the future. And I developed this great reservoir of athletic skill. And I was 22 or 23. I was hit by a car, and it nearly amputated my leg. It crushed my back. I broke my collarbone, broke my hand, and I was in a wheelchair instantly. And that is the
wow.
pivotal moment of my life, because it was the first time I truly faced my own mortality. And I realized in that moment that I would continue on. It took me a couple weeks to adjust to the new situation and being in a wheelchair and not being as active. But I still went to the my martial arts school and taught. And I could stand on my left foot, and my right arm was broken, and I would demonstrate with my broken leg. And I would go to the gym and work out the sides that I could. And that's in the moment I realized that I had suffered so much early in my life that I was tired of it. And as long as I was going to be alive, I was no longer going to let the fear of not doing well, of not being sufficient, of possibly dying, keeping me back from anything that I wanted to do. And that is a pivotal moment of I could have been really fragile. And the neuroscience says that people that can take great negative outcomes like that and really process them and find some other way to move forward. That is the epitome of a growth mindset. And that's what an anti fragile person is. No matter what
Mm,
stress, what indicator comes to them, they're going to use that to propel themselves to the next level. If I'd never gotten my health back, I still would have continued to do what I did. And it gave me a real chance to feel what it felt like to be less than. You
you
know,
froze up
I,
on me.
did I? Oh no. We good?
No, I think it was me actually. I interrupted you. My
Oh,
bad. I
that's
didn't
all right.
catch the last part of that, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Hopefully you guys did. Darn
You know,
internet.
yeah, yeah. It is a wonderful invention and difficult at the same time for all of us, you know. But big thing is
Yeah, and I
that
had a good follow-up question too, but I lost
yeah.
it.
Well, we're overcoming a negative outcome like that. That's really the key to becoming less fragile. Um, and it's very sad. We watch people who come under stress and they distract themselves from it constantly,
Mhm.
instead of embracing that. And I can't say this was a conscious decision, but when I went into surgery, I didn't know if I was going to come back with a leg. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And then I found myself going from a very high level martial artist. I just won what was termed a national event at that level. And then they told me I wouldn't walk again. Uh, I
Wow.
had suffered the injury that no athlete comes back from, which was I broke both bones in the lower part of my leg and crushed my ankle. We know in MMA as a strength and conditioning coach and as a cornerman that this is an unsolvable injury. We've seen it with high level MMA competitors like Anderson Silva, Conor McGregor, you don't come back well from this. And I was told I'd never walk again, much less run. And I definitely never do the things that I loved. And I realized in that moment that I could not accept that. There had to be a way around that. And that's what drives people forward is I will not accept my limitations. I will become better despite whatever's holding me back. And I think that's
so powerful.
Yeah.
Because that boils down to a decision, does it not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a very intentional decision.
You know, there's a push-pull sequence in the mind. We're always pulling ourselves forward. We're always pushing ourselves forward. And it's a play back and forth. And it's a very important play for us to do these things. And we're one of the few creatures that can overcome significant injuries and still manage to move forward. Medical care has a big part of that. But it is our ability to face that we know our end is coming. And that there could be less of us, and that someday there'll be none of us. And how we face that, that fear, which is part of our show tonight, drives us forward and to propel and become a better person. It is substantially useful for human beings to have that. And the Stoics said, "Memento mori," death comes for us all. And it's a very morbid feeling, but it's not that. It means live. Do what you can do. Be the best version of yourself. Change, adapt, become resilient. Don't let life crush you, and it will. And I got to tell you, as you get older, it doesn't get easier; it gets harder.
So, what are the underlying fears that you see often in class? I know somebody can say something. I've like been around when you've sort of talked about this, or somebody can say something, but they mean something else. There's something deeper to what they're actually saying, which reveals to you what lies underneath, which is usually some sort of fear. What do you commonly see in people?
It's very interesting. One of the greatest fears for most people is the fear of success.
Really?
They're really afraid to invest in themselves because if they fall short, then they've tried, they feel like that means they're less than they are. It's a very common fear. Performing in front of other people, tremendous fear, like giving a speech, but shooting in front of people is a big fear too. Being measured. This is the nonsense about, that there's no timers in a gunfight and, timers blank my mind. You're afraid to be measured in a meaningful manner. These are very common fears. And then there's real fear that you have been living less than you could be. If you let go of your bias, if you let go of your inner critic, maybe you could be more than you are. But there's a real comfort in being less than sometimes for people. And I see that fear quite frequently. And then for us that like to aim a lot, there's a fear of truly letting go, letting events propel us forward, right? And to ride, to let go, to trust ourselves. And, if we look at the list of fears, those are the easiest ones that all human beings suffer from one extent to another. But the good thing about those fears is they create a motivation mechanism to do something. The only time that fear is really bad is when it creates a sense of standing still. Like we talk about in fighting, fight, flight, or freeze. And it's an unfortunate way that it ended up with the 3 F's like that, because it should be, in a healthy person, it should be fight, flight, or assess instead of freeze. But what happens is if you can't make up your mind whether the risk is worth the squeeze or whether you should run away, then what happens is you get stuck in that moment. And that's when fear overwhelms us. But to become less fearful means that we have to harness our fear. We say fearless, not fear is absent. It is something that is an incredible motivator. And, there's a great quote from Dune that, fear is the mind killer. And it's basically a shadow. Mostly what we fear is not what's going to happen. And we fear for the future so much and our control over it that we actually hold ourselves back and worry about it, or we fear what happened in the past may happen again and we cause it. And that's the real danger of fear. It should be a great motivator. And frankly, if I don't feel fear when I do a podcast, or if I don't feel fear,
Are you afraid of me, Brian?
you know, get in the game, right?
I
These
know,
words are going
right?
to exist forever. The
It
things
is. It's true.
yeah, it matters, and we're going to do good work. And the fear is that I won't be fully present. I won't give my best output. That
Yeah.
somebody is listening right now, that if I said or crafted or did the right thing, I could reach them. And that's a motivation.
Yeah.
So it gives me the motivation to move forward and to be present instead of just doing this in a lackluster, boring way.
Right. Right.
And I
Which
want
is
to
what
feel
most
that to be
podcasts
alive.
are.
Yes. Be
Totally,
alive.
totally get that. Totally excited about that too. But I want to ask you something before you keep going here, because there's so much here. Like everything you say, I feel like there could be a follow-up question to it. Okay. So we know this is where I think people get it wrong. I think people think they can eliminate fear, and you cannot eliminate fear. Is it true though that you can use fear to fuel you in a positive way?
I'll tell you what would be really, really scary is to be absent of fear.
Yeah.
We call it psychopathy. And what happens is without fear, impulsive behavior goes through the roof because there's nothing to mitigate it. As a survival mechanism, it was always great for humans to believe that there is a bear in the bush, or there is a rattlesnake, or you shouldn't be too close to an edge of a cliff because the outcomes of those decisions are particularly negative. But also fear empowers us and makes us stronger, it makes us faster, it makes us more alive if we learn to surf it instead of trying to control it. People want to control their fear, and simply it is a very primitive mechanism that is full of wonderful chemicals that you couldn't even come close to on the street, that are giving you an extra power, and they want to propel you forward. So if you'll accept that energy, and that's what our system gives us, these hormones give us energy, and they tell us to take action and to do more than you are. It's important, but I think a lot of people learn to deal with fear from movies and media.
Yeah.
And we were watching something the other day, and the guy had a violent, he was in a violent encounter, and he threw up right afterwards. And I was like, now that's the truth, because I know as an MMA coach, I know as an MMA fighter, we do throw up. We go to the bathroom a lot. Horrible things happen because the system is trying to get ready to survive. But the benefit is the clarity of the moment, to being fully present. When you're a little fearful, you're being really present. The real danger in this, though, is the more you do this, the higher degrees it takes to get to that fearful state if you're not careful. Surfing's a great example of this. They said nobody could ride a wave bigger than 25 feet. We got guys riding waves that are 100 feet tall, but the outcome is if they wreck, they're not coming back. Free
So
climbers.
this is what we call the adrenaline junkie then. That's exactly what that is. Okay.
It is.
Okay, so here's the question then. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one little thing with this, there's a way to get around it. Like, I'm going to be in performance mode when I leave this podcast. So the right thing for me to do is something very trivial. I may go clean up my room. I may stack and organize something. Maybe I clean the bathroom. I do something very, very normal and mundane to put my system back into a more normal state. So it's not always in this addictive mechanism of chasing this. And then I don't really enjoy those things, but I recognize it's a part of life. It's, it's a bit of humility involved in that. It allows me to structure back. Whenever I teach a class for a weekend, I get this very big high. I love it. But Monday I have a very big low, and I have to travel home, and it's all mundane stuff. So I try to be the best traveler I can. I try to be more polite and kind. I try to be as present as I can for it. And I accept that the price of that experience, that fearful experience of teaching at the highest level, is going to come with the cost of being a
Mm-hmm.
bit depressed on Monday.
Wow. Okay, we're gonna get off the topic of fear soon, but one more thing about it.
Good.
Because we know there are people that are on one spectrum of it. We call those adrenaline junkies, right? They've harnessed the fear. In fact, they like that, right? But there's the other end of the spectrum who have not figured out how to harness it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And every time fear enters into their body, there's a biological right reaction. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
And they choose to deal with it very differently. So how would you advise somebody that's on that end of the spectrum to start to look at it differently so that they can start to use that in whatever they're doing?
There's a very good process for this, and it's desensitizing somebody to the stimulus. So if you're really afraid of something, what you do is very small, contained reactions. So if somebody is afraid of elevators, maybe one day they just go and look at elevators. Maybe they draw a picture of an elevator, but they just spend some time around it. And then eventually they'll touch the button for the elevator. Maybe they stick their head inside the elevator and look around. Maybe they step in and step out. But they're moving forward a little bit at a time. Now, we use this in the firearms industry all the time. This is called a introduction to handguns. We
Yeah.
teach them what's important. We teach them how to handle it safely. Then we usually have some sort of dry work, maybe including, and it should, blue guns, cert guns. Then maybe work a little bit with a dry pistol. And by the time they actually fire the gun, they've been somewhat desensitized to the stimulus. Unlike the videos that we see where some guy gives somebody a really powerful handgun or rifle and says, shoot this, which creates a lifelong scar because they fire something, it hurts them, and they have no control over it, and then they're mocked for that. So this is the way we move forward. And I would say a large majority of my business is people who have already had a traumatic event and they're trying to regain their strength. And so what they want to do is walk forward on a martial path and face these violences that intruded in their life and gave them a chance to learn to manage it and then move past being a victim into a survivor. There's a significant, important difference that I have survived this event. And not only have I survived, but I am thriving. And I am strong enough to walk the land again, and nobody can take that strength away from me. That's the secret to working through it when you're really fearful, is just do the smallest thing that you can.
So how do you apply that desensitization to an internal fear rather than an external stimulus that makes you afraid? Does that make sense?
Well, there's usually, even with an internal fear, the greatest is public speaking. So you start speaking,
Okay. I get it.
You have to do something. There has to be some action. Fear that is overwhelming usually tells you to stay still, which could be very valuable in certain states. If you were being hunted by an animal that tracks motion, staying still was a good survival mechanism. What happens with people is neurotic behavior overcomes that mechanism, and then they can't do anything. So whatever it is you fear the most, you do just a little bit of it. We do it all the time. Like amusement parks are perfect examples.
Oh man, I hate roller coasters.
That's right. But if I put you on the kiddie coaster, or the little train that went a circle,
I'd be fine with that. Yeah.
Yep. And we have Six Flags here, so it has bigger and bigger and bigger roller coasters. So and what happens is people ride a little bit, and then they're like, well, that was kind of fun, and then they try the next one, and then it becomes a challenge to them. That's the whole secret to it, is find the challenge inside of it.
Yeah. Just like when you buy one gun and then you have to try another one and then you have to buy that one. And then, I understand how this works. All right, cool. Well, you really unpacked that well for me. I appreciate your patience with me with all those questions. So let's roll into some of the questions from the Facebook group. So let's start with this though. You've talked about on past shows how, I want to give this all context before we dig deep into some of these questions. You talked about the importance of having clear goals. Can you give an example of what that means and what that doesn't mean and why it's important?
Okay. This is one of the hardest things to get people on board with. if you, as an instructor, we often give a clear goal and they immediately subvert it. So if I tell them to hit the target and there's no time, and it's a 8-inch circle, let's say that, and they hit the 8-inch circle, they'll say, well, it's not in the middle of the middle.
Oh,
So
yeah. I hear that all the time.
So it's their goal was never clear. If I
Okay.
wanted
Yeah.
them to hit the middle of the middle, I would say that's the clear goal.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with speed shooters. Listen, you really didn't hit the target very well, but did you see how fast I was? You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're changing the goal constantly. And we can't chase more than one goal at a time, because the way our biases work is we need to know what's important. We need to know what the order of process is, but then we need to know how much time and how much information. So say I'm in accuracy mode, I have to let time go, and then I simply do it. And a lot of people get stuck here because it's really rewarding, because every time you hit the
Mm-hmm.
target, it's really rewarding, but you keep changing the goal because, after you shoot your first dot torture, you're immediately going to make it harder by moving backwards. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've essentially done is made the target harder. And you said, my goal wasn't clearly to shoot this effectively and efficiently. It was to shoot it once, be perfect, and then make it harder.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a goal. That is a critical filter system that will make sure that you're never, ever going to experience gratitude for your progress. That's the hard part inside of this. If we don't have the clear goal, it has to be well established. So we break it down in firearms into 3 things. There's accuracy and precision, which is one thing, speed and efficiency, and then performance mode. Accuracy and precision says hit the target, but don't worry about time. Now, there may be a time standard, but it should be 3 or 4 times what it normally takes to do that skill, because you're
Mm-hmm.
trading that time for more information. Speed and
Mm-hmm.
efficiency says we have to let the accuracy standard go. I know all you accuracy people, I can feel you right now. What do you mean?
Yeah, it's
Welcome
so
to
hard.
AA.
Right.
So maybe I say just hit the silhouette, but I need you to do it more efficiently. I need you to do it more quickly, because we're building a reservoir of skill. We're sprinting. It doesn't have to be accurate. It has to be faster, and it has to be
Mm-hmm.
done safely. But there's a very limited amount of time we can perform speed and efficiency relative to accuracy and precision. You can do that for long periods of time, so they can get grossly out of order. If they're not well balanced, like you do too much accuracy, but you never work on your efficiency, when you get to performance mode, which requires you to have both skills available, and whatever you earned in your current level of skill and practice is what you can bring to the table, nothing more or less. If one is really weak and the other is exceptionally strong, and the test pushes you towards your weakness, you'll find an utter collapse inside of it, because there's nothing to prop you up there. So the goal for coaches, not just in the firearms industry, is always to balance technical progression with speed and efficiency. And they go
Mm-hmm.
back and forth, and they're pushing and pulling each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, try medium is my thing, right? Don't try hard. Try medium. And that makes a big difference, though. The clear goal is this: what am I working on? Is this accuracy? Is this speed? Or is it performance?
Yeah, but most people's goal are things like, I want to be a better shooter.
Yep.
I want to get in shape. I want to feel more healthy.
Yep.
Those kind of goals.
So my first question as a coach is, what would make you a better shooter?
Right.
And then the first thing they usually mention is not the thing we're going to work on. What we're going to have to do is find the thing they don't want to talk about. They don't want any part of it. You can always say, hey, listen, if I was a little more accurate. So my next question is, are you accurate already? Well, I can hit the target. I said, well, how long does it take you? Well, I'm not big on timers. You can see the fear mechanism right there. So I know the
Yeah.
weakness is I have to find some way to make this not only rewarding extrinsically, because you're talking about extrinsic rewards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a better shooter. I'm going to be more fit so people see me in a certain light. And the problem with that is it always pushes towards quantity instead of quality. That extrinsic reward is always, and so you're going to do more of whatever you're good at, and you're going to do less. And I used to always laugh at the gym because, you have all these fighters there, and some of them are really flexible, and some of them are really fast, and some of them are really strong. Some of them have great endurance. Some of them are really agile. Whatever they're great at, that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're lifting weights. They're running a speed ladder. They're hitting a bag as fast as they can. They're never doing the thing that I need them to do, which is, hey, listen, you're one of the strongest guys in the gym, but you can't kick above a knee because you're so inflexible. Well, I don't really like to work on flexibility. I might get injured. All right, let's learn how to make you strong in this position so you can become more flexible. That's the key to get people to change this, is how can we approach our preferential mode of not wanting to do certain areas and clear goals and to push ourselves forward. And they've got to be small bites. It can't be big.
Yeah,
You know,
they do.
being the
Yeah.
next
And you,
best shooter in the world, you'll never know. I'm a pretty good shooter. I just don't know how good I am. And I never will, because I can't go against everybody at the same time. And what if somebody's having a bad day, or they're sick, or their gun jams? It doesn't mean, it just meant I was the best in that moment. So what's the goal got to be? What's the best version of Brian that can show up? The one that's accurate, consistent, efficient, and disciplined.
Yeah. Okay. You said something the other day about people want technical solutions to what was that you said the other day? It was so profound.
Yeah, they want technical solutions to psychological and physiological problems.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, we'll dig deeper here in just a minute. Okay. All right. So you mentioned discipline. Let's start with that. Discipline and consistency came up over and over in the Facebook group. It's a big one for people that they struggle with this. So what do you have to say about this?
So if we were to think of it as a Newtonian physics law, discipline is inertia. Things in motion tend to stay in motion. Things at rest tend to stay at rest. The problem for human beings is we cycle about every 90 days at the cellular level. You're a new person every 90 days. You've regenerated yourself. And now you've regenerated yourself. Did you get enough sleep? Did you eat well? Did you do enough activities that create enough stress so that your body will adapt to it? Did you take enough time off? So how do we move forward? How do we motivate ourselves? We need about 90 days of change before we can see any difference in it. And mostly you're going to have to do things you don't like. You're not going to enjoy it. And frankly,
you're not going to see it either.
You're not going to see anything, and you're going to struggle. Human beings need struggle, but they need purposeful struggle. They need mindful struggle, that if I invest in myself and make myself just as important as other things in my life, like, you want to be a good father, you want to be a good mother, you want to be a good husband, you want to be a good wife, you want to be a good friend. So why don't you do that for yourself? I always ask people, I say, are you a good friend? And they always nod. And I said, how do you treat your friends? And they say, oh, I'm very, compassionate. And so what happened in times of trouble and like this? And I said, well, how do you treat yourself? Are you a good friend to yourself? No, they're not. And this is where the motivation problem comes, because they think if they punish themselves and suffer and do something so hard that it's going to make them better. But that's not the truth. What we need to do is pay attention. We have to have a clear goal. We have to be present. We have to get immediate feedback from what we're doing. And then we have to challenge ourselves. And we need to do it for 90 days. Then it becomes a habit. And the only way to get rid of bad habits is to substitute a good habit. If anybody's ever struggled with bad habits, they never go away. It's for the rest of your life. I often joke on the range, when I was a kid, I used to dip. And, we had a shooting team, and I walk out on the range, and, a lot of shooters dip, and I see it and my mouth waters. Now, if I did dip, I'd throw up everywhere. I couldn't stand it. That's how deep that mechanism is there. There's still a reward center craving something that I know is bad for me. So how do I overcome that? I have a good habit. My good habit on the range is I chew gum. I give myself something better to do. Same thing with when we're talking about discipline, what we're talking about is creating a habit that's better than the ones that you have now. Mostly your habits are pleasureful, which means there's no real value in them. They distract you from living, and they keep you happy, full of dopamine, but they don't give you enough struggle where you can get to the rich rewards of serotonin and allow you to feel contentment. And what we're really struggling for is contentment. You must do the hard work, and you must do it continuously. And I mentioned this the other day in a post that the emergency research says that you shouldn't make public declarations, because what happens is your best friends always come forward and they cheerlead for you, and you get a reward, and they say, oh, you're going to do great. The reward is complacency now. You don't tend to follow through. So it's better to wait 90 days before you make any public declaration about what you're going to do, until you get this established habit. Now, if you can keep going, what happens to that habit is it does become discipline. And now it becomes something you do. And if you don't do it, you're not the best version of yourself. So often days, I don't feel like working out. I don't want to drive practice, but I walk in here and I say, I'm going to give it the best attention that I can give today, or I'm going to take today off, and then tomorrow I start up again. But you got to be real careful with that one, because if you do that every day, then you'll never start again. If you're an overworker, give yourself a break. If you're an underworker, go ahead and push through it. And then discipline becomes your character. And you said this to me, other people say this, I'm like some sort of machine, but I'm not. I am the most chaotic, passion-filled, complete mess of a human being inside of me that you've ever met. But what I've done is, for 40 years, I have practiced improving myself until the world gets the best version. And I'm going to tell you why this is so powerful to me. Is abuse is generational. It goes from one generation to the next. So I made a promise it would stop with me. My parents were a product of abusive parents. It was going to stop with me. And it did. But I'm not making the world a better place by stopping. So I thought, that's not enough. All I'm doing is creating an absence of it. What I have to do is make up for all these generations of abuse. So what can I do? I can serve. And I can find other young people that need help, because I know what they're going through. And now I'm more concerned about them than in myself. But if I'm going to lead by example, I have to do the work. And I have to do it at a deep level. And this is what philosophers used to be. They were warriors, they were boxers, they were wrestlers, because you have to live your philosophy and you have to move forward. And that's the profound part of this discipline. It becomes character, and your character becomes what people expect of you from here on out. And more importantly, it's what you expect of yourself. And what you're really training for is to create this deep reservoir of strength and character. So when life gets really hard, you're not overwhelmed. Because if you don't struggle when you have it easy, when it gets hard, you're not going to be sufficient to the task. We must build more strength so that when the time comes, we have a vast pool of it. And then we know that we can survive, and that we can move forward, and that we can become a better version of ourselves.
That's a mic drop moment, Brian. Where's your
40
mic?
years I've been thinking about that one.
No, it's so profound that I almost didn't know what to say. So that tells you something right there. I didn't know I'm like, oh man, this is really good. How am I going to follow this up? But this just becomes part of who you are over time. And I believe that this whole process of developing yourself, creating consistency and discipline is an inner strength that you have to develop within yourself. It literally, for me anyway, has nothing to do, as you call them, the grams, the out external world and what they think. Because if you know at the end of the day what your strength is, what you're capable of, that you know who you are, that is what matters. Because I think people compromise their own character within themselves by negotiating with themselves constantly, by making excuses constantly, by not living up to who they know they can really be. And I don't know why I'm so passionate about that all of a sudden, but that is really, I believe, what it's about, or what it should be about at the end of the day, not about anything else. And so do it for yourself, do it for your family, if nothing else. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. That one
There's a
really hit
river,
home. It really did.
Well, there's a river of this feeling. It comes from generations of human beings that have been willing to become better versions of themselves. That's what's important. Are you better than you were so that you can serve yourself and you can serve your family, you can serve your friends, you can serve your community, and ultimately you can serve your nation and your world? And that we leave something more that's a lasting legacy. It doesn't have your name on it. It's not named after you. It's not a
Right.
great thing. It is, you have created better people around you. And we're, those of us that are connected to that river, jump in it and keep moving forward. And that's what you feel. And when I say these things, it's almost like I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's everybody who's come before me. My teachers have taught me this, and life has taught me this, you know, reaching all the way back to the great philosophies of Stoicism, you know, the samurai philosophies. They all spoke to me at a deep level because I didn't have the parents that I needed. So I needed something to model good behavior because I wasn't a good man at the time. So how do I move forward?
I'm so glad that you made that decision years ago to not be fragile and then to learn to serve others, because there's really no better fulfillment, I believe, in life than serving others. It is unparalleled. So I really appreciate what you do. Okay, let's go on to the next big hurdle for people. And this is another one that I heard over and over on the group, and that is, I don't have enough time. Time management is a huge issue. And you talked about earlier how we are distracted as a society in so many ways. We are bombarded with information constantly. Can we take control of that? And what can we do to better manage our time? By the way, I did a tidbit on this last week, guys. So you should go back and watch that too. But also definitely listen to Brian. He probably has a lot better things to say about it than me.
Well, we're all trading our time for something. And it depends what's important to you. I'm just going to give you I don't have all the answers on this, but to me, it's so important to get up and to do the work in the morning that I have never been a morning person because I taught martial arts until 9:30 at night. So I got home, ate dinner, I went to bed at midnight, you know, and then I had to get up early to go teach, but I you know, not much energy. And now I don't have to do that. You know, I'm traveling on the road, I'm on a schedule, but when I'm at home, I tend to jump out of bed 5:30 in the morning. And when I say jump out of bed, I do because it's the only time I can get what I need to get done. And it's because I have a life to live and it draws on me. But if I can get that first hour and I can get past everybody in my house without them talking to me and get out to my little shack out here and do my work, I'm a better person. And now my wife has recognized that. So she encourages it that, you know, go practice, you'll be a better person. But I don't enjoy lifting weights and I certainly don't enjoy cardio, but I feel content afterwards. And by overcoming that one thing in the morning, it gives you great satisfaction that you can fulfill your job and move forward in the day because you've done something of value. You are trading your time for something always, and there'll never be enough. So the one thing you can really change is make sure you get as sufficient sleep as you can, eat as well as you can so that when you do have time, you don't sit still. And then carve 2 or 3 times a week, even if it's only 20 minutes for yourself. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to become a burden to everybody you love, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, whether it's cancer, whether it's mental health problems. It's coming for all of us. And we have to carve these spots out. And scrolling through Instagram won't do it. And watching a TV show won't do it. And that extra snooze button on the clock won't do it. You got to make it because you're the most important person. And if you love somebody else, they count on you. And if you're not carving this out for them and yourself, then you're doing a grave disservice. And that's how we find the time. You know, there's some great trackers on how you spend your time, you know, social media trackers and stuff like that. And
there's that measurement again.
Yeah. And you need real metrics because you don't think you have any time because you're addicted to rush, try, and hurry because you're always procrastinating, which is not a bad thing. A lot of people procrastinate, but they're not well organized, so they waste a lot of time. But as you know, we recently got horses, and horses require real interaction, and they require I have a horse that I'm in charge of now. So I cut out something that I enjoyed doing in the morning, but I'm not going to do it anymore because now I'm going to go outside and make sure the horse gets the work he needs, that I interact with him, that I ride, not be trying to become a great horseman. That's not my future, but it's a great connection, and it's a struggle. There's, I'd rather sit here and do this other thing that I enjoy in the morning, but I'm not going to. I've traded. And so I'm doing it willingly because it's my idea. And the great thing is this horse we have, Yoshi, I think he may be a dog. I'm not really sure. He is loving, content thing. And there's this great fulfillment of being close to him. And I'll share one thing with everybody. I've taken up rucking, and this morning there's a mountain behind us, but they're Georgia mountains. They're not that big. They're only about 1,000 feet. So I walked about 2 miles up to the top of it, and I watched the sun come up. It was miserable.
Wow.
It was 24 degrees. It was cold. I was dressed well. I had a heavy pack on my back, but I was the only one standing there watching the sun come up. And I felt this profound connection to everything in that moment because I'd suffered for it. My nose was running. I'm fasting still. I'm doing an exercise. I had to climb out of bed. It was all friggin' miserable and beautiful. And that's what you have to do is you got to stop trading pleasures out and go find something and listen, if it's dry practice, 5 minutes will do you. If you're smart about it, you don't need 15, you don't need a half hour. You really don't need a lot of time to do any one thing. Find 5 or 10 minutes, start swinging a kettlebell, do your dry practice, do something and be the best version of yourself so that you can be sufficient for the ones you claim to love. Love yourself enough to be present for them and be healthy.
Yeah, totally agree. One thing that popped in my brain whenever you were talking about time is that you were talking about procrastination and wasting time scrolling on Instagram, whatever. And I think the illusion that we all have is that we'll always have more time. And the truth is we don't know how much time we have. And I believe there should be, if you really think about that, I think for me anyway, it creates an urgency for me to think that I don't know how much time I really have. And so it makes me prioritize my life in a way to live knowing that we don't know. I think we have the illusion of thinking there's always going to be tomorrow and there's always going to be more time. And that may not be the case. So I know that's going pretty deep, but it's the truth.
We have to think what the worst version of ourselves really is too. People think, this person's evil or they do these bad things. But for some people, the worst version of themselves is they simply never live. They exist. They do nothing. They gain nothing. They feel nothing. And their life gets increasingly more difficult because they create a chemical dependency and they have more issues and more problems. Whatever is pleasurable and good at the beginning usually costs you in the long run. And whatever is very difficult and requires struggle usually rewards you in the long run. And if you start taking that and, delay the gratification and move through that phase of struggle, you're going to be a different person. And it's hard, and I don't want the worst version of somebody as somebody who just never did anything. They weren't present for anybody, including themselves, and they simply existed their way through life.
Went through the motions. Yeah.
Yeah. And young men are committing suicide at a rate that's unheard of right now because I understand they don't have tribe anymore. They don't have the friends. They don't have support. I don't know what it's like for a woman, but I know men go through these difficult times, and it's this disconnected, like we know everyone in the world, but we're not really close with anyone, that we have anything we want at the tips of our fingers, but we're never satisfied. And the real satisfaction is doing hard work. And it's a hard sell, even to myself, sometimes it's a hard sell, but that's the way our chemistry is set up, and you mess with it at your own peril.
That's really good. We have a couple more things we're going to unpack here. And then we're going to get to the live Q&A. So if you guys have questions for Brian Hill, please put those in the comments and we'll be getting to those shortly. So a couple more things, Brian, then we'll let you go.
Doing great.
Okay. One person wanted you to talk about, well, she didn't say, could you have Brian talk about this? But I asked, what are people struggling with right now, right? Because, we want this show to be helpful to you and we want to try and help you the best we can. And Brian is just a wealth of information. And so this person commented that they were having trouble navigating what is being marketed to them and knowing if it's a good product or good training or not. And there's so much information out there right now. And I can see how that can be a hard thing to navigate through. Any advice for that?
Yeah, this is tough. It's the first time human beings have had so much information available to them, and once again, we're back to the thing that may look really well produced and very flashy and really grab your attention may not be what you need. So I asked a friend of mine that knows a lot about horses the other day who I should pay attention to, and she was kind enough to send me a list of 5 trainers. This is the way that we get information. We can filter it. You find somebody that you feel is so let me unpack this real quick. Cheerleaders in your life lead to complacencies. Critics in your life create disappointment. What you really want is a coach, because they're looking for the better version of you. And so you have to find somebody you trust to do that. So I found somebody I trust, and I asked them a simple question. Where's a good place to go for information? Because I know they've gone through this god-awful box of holsters that we've all gone through. And, they've figured out what works and what doesn't work and who's to pay attention. The other thing is you start looking for sources. Is this person ever citing sources outside of themselves? Are there a lot of people that interact? Who do other instructors go to train from? You have to use this kind of filter. And at the beginning, you're not very good at it, But I would say a lot of times if you hear, this is the way I tell you to do it, it's my way, it's this way, you can only do it this way. When you hear that singular
Red flag,
absolute, that's a huge, if there's no uncertainty, because I'm uncertain all the time. In fact, I've got a lot of great questions and not a lot of great answers most of the time. As much as everybody talks about grip, I'm not convinced, because I've seen 4 or 5 grips that work at a national level and people win with, and they're all different. So yeah, you may have your preference, but what we're looking for is, think about this. Have you tried this? How does this information work? And it's really tough with the information. And then there's a part of our brain that prefers people. It makes a very quick decision. I like them, I don't like them. I would suggest this. Follow a couple people you like, but pay attention to people you don't like, and then figure out what it is you don't like about them. Usually it's something inside yourself you don't like very much. Like I don't like disrespectful people, because I have been disrespectful in my life. I don't respect authority in the way I should. I question it all the time. So apparently it irritates me. So I look for other people like myself that are constantly pushing on things and asking good questions. And, even if they call me into account and say it, that's what's really important. We start looking through the information. We find a couple that we don't, you got to know what the argument against it is as much as what is the argument for it. When I came up, Masada Yup was it. I took his class in the 80s. That was it. He rode all the time. We read magazines. If you wanted to go to the class, you sent a check to an undisclosed location and may or may not show up, So now you can get on the internet and find it. And I think there's some pretty good groups out there, but that's really hard too,
Right.
So, find somebody you trust and ask them for the first recommendations of where you should go from here. And then, there's like, I know I'm sponsored by Filster, but they're doing a great job with their concealment workshop, and they don't want you, they don't even say buy their equipment. Here's how you can conceal a gun better. What a wonderful thing that is. You guys, I think you're doing a wonderful job between the podcast, putting quality classes in, and supporting people. Like Brent at the beginning, you guys support each other and you make a group, and it gives you a good showing of how to move forward. As far as technical information, it is just a path. Eventually you have to come up with your own technique,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to work. So you need 3 things to make sure you're doing well. You need to do it, you need to measure it, and you need to have somebody who is an expert watch it. So I'm a pretty good shooter. I've been struggling really hard the last 6 months, very aggravated with my shooting. I have tried everybody's methodology, and I finally got fed up, and I said, man, I'm going to go see AJ Zito, because I trust AJ. He's a master level shooter. He builds fine custom guns. He is an excellent instructor, but he'll tell me the truth too. He never holds back, and he asks great questions, and he's not stuck on his own methodology. And I went out there, and I shot in front of him, and he told me exactly what I thought was going on, but I needed that third party to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And what he told me was, you're wasting your time. Your draw is good enough. You're good enough. He goes, but you are odd because you don't seem to miss no matter how fast you go. So just accept it for what it is. You don't have to try to push to miss. It's costing me about 10% of my total speed, but it seems to be worth it. So I got another person to watch me, so that's my coach. Yeah. And then he put me on the timer, and that coached me too. And it showed me when I did things efficiently and inefficiently. And then I had my own deep feeling about it. And I'm creating my own technique, because apparently I'm one of the few accuracy dudes that's gone into, performance mode. Because mostly the fast guys like to go fast,
Right.
They do. And
you're an anomaly.
They get better. Well, they get better sooner. They have no choice because they tend to miss a lot.
Yeah.
So they fix it. We're accuracy people. They get rewarded for shooting a target, and they don't ever want to go fast because they already hit the target. There's no reward. But it's a hard answer, and frankly, there's some really good groups out there, and you got good people ask away. And whenever you're asking for information, I would always phrase it in, what advice could you offer me as a new shooter? It's a great way. I did that to you. Do you remember all this conversation? I asked you that about horses. I was like, what advice do you have for a new horse?
Yeah. And you got a litany of things. I should have organized them into an email.
It doesn't matter. It was great though. It gives me this gives me a filtration process that I'll ask, because as a beginner, or especially an intermediate shooter, you get so confused because you go to one guy's class and he says this, and the other guy says this, and then she says that. And you're like, but know this, there's diversity in shooting. There's not an absolute technique. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it. And as long as I've been around, there's been several changes in shooting. And I expect it to continue to evolve. And right now, we're in the greatest time of pistol shooting ever. Frankly, we don't know what's possible with a handgun and a red dot anymore. We're not even close to the outside edges of it.
Yeah.
I'm lost too. Give me some information.
I don't know. I could give you very much not on shooting, maybe on horses, but not on shooting. Okay.
But it's all the same thing.
It is all the same thing. I know. It's so funny. That's why I mentioned, in your class, in all of your classes, you joke and say, well, you bring them in saying it's a pistol class. And you do. Yeah, you'll learn to be a better shooter, but boy, you'll learn a lot more than that too about yourself. And I really think that's what mastery is. It's learning who you are at the end of the day. All right. We're almost to the end, Brian. How are you feeling?
Doing great. Okay. I didn't even look at the clock until you mentioned it. So that's how caught up I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, and I gave you the longest introduction ever on the planet Earth. So I ate up some time there, but that's okay. All right. The last thing that I want to ask you about is overcoming setbacks. So a couple people were talking about having difficulty overcoming setbacks, and it could be physical or mental setbacks. Do you have any advice for them?
I wish it was better advice, but there is a process of getting ready to change, especially at the first 80% of learning is pretty simple. So we'll just stay on guns, but it's pretty simple. You learn how does a gun work, and how to be safe, and how to hit the target. And that's the first 80% of learning in gun classes. And then somebody says, hey, you ought to be a little faster, more efficient with that. And you may start working on that. And then you start bumping up, well, how can I be that fast and then have that much accuracy? Now you're going back and forth. And what it creates is the term is emotional ambivalence. You're very uncertain and you're kind of aggravated at the same time. But it's necessary because we really want to be a bit angry about our progress occasionally, because anger is an agent of change. And if we can get a little dissatisfied with who we are, we can heat ourselves up enough to change. It's an important
That's so
process.
profound because I get angry all the time.
Good for you. Yeah.
You're the first person that's ever encouraged it, Brian.
Well, listen, I'm a very angry person, and my whole life people are like, don't be angry, which just makes me angrier. But I had a coach look at me and he goes, I'm glad you're pissed off. He said, what are you going to do about it? And see, that's really the nature of it. You need more energy, and adrenaline cements learning. You know, people don't get that. So we need some adrenaline. We need to get some learning. We need to get a little angry, and we need to change the status quo. You've got to change the status quo. And that's why you're upset. And that's what a setback is, because, well, basically you're pretty stubborn. You don't want to change. And that's why you feel like it's a setback, because you've been trying the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And eventually you'll become dissatisfied with, no matter how good you are, if you don't move forward again, you have to do it. Now, the setback usually pushes you back a little bit further than you want. You don't just move straight ahead and get better and get better. You get pushed back, and then you come forward and you make a little loop and you go around it. And what happens is you're kind of blind to your own change. Just like you are to your own biases, you can't really see your progress as well as you can. So it's important to have some landmarks, some standards, some qualifications, somebody to look at you and see if you're improving, and then are you moving forward? Because you won't see it yourself. And setbacks should be welcomed, because that means you're getting ready to get better. And a little bit of aggravation should be welcomed. I had a great fighter in my gym, and when she got mad, she would cry. And it would make other fighters uncomfortable, because, you know, guys in tears, they don't do very well with that. They're totally disarmed. But she would get mad. I'd leave her alone, and then she'd come back, and then she'd get better. I knew it was going to happen. And the next week she was going to be a better fighter. And one of the fighters came to me and he's like, hey, you know, it makes me uncomfortable when she cries. And I said, what about the 4-year-old temper tantrums you have? He goes, what do you mean? And I go, you took your gloves off, you threw them against the wall, you yelled the F-bomb, and you stormed out. I go, who's more disruptive? A couple of crocodile tears, or a 4-year-old that I have to deal with on a constant basis? And he looked at me and he goes, I never thought about it like that. And I said, why don't you change yourself? I said, you can have temper tantrums for the rest of your life, but you're never going to get what you want. I said, why don't you do something with this anger that's positive? What are you so afraid of that you can't change, that you're getting angry enough that you want to eat yourself up? And that's when they change. So setbacks should be welcomed. Frustration should be welcomed. It's hard. But my coach told me a third of your athletic career, you should be unhappy. A third, you should be content. And a third, you should be ecstatic. And if it gets out of balance, you'll know right away, because you'll stop progressing.
There's so much good stuff. So much. Brent is having trouble in the background writing out all the Brian Hill quotables. I told him that was part of his job tonight. Anytime Brian Hill says something profound, you need to type it out in the comments and drop it in the chat. And he has been busy tonight. I'm going to have to give him a raise.
He's doing a good job.
He is. Yes, Brent, you're doing awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to the questions here in just a minute. So this is your last chance to ask Brian Hill a question live on the air. And so before we get to those, Brian, where can people go to find you, to take a class with you, and where will you be in the future?
It's the CompleteCombatant.com. That's the CompleteCombatant.com. So I've never been comfortable with doing this part, so I make a big joke out of it and do it overboard now. And I'm really lucky that my wife is exceptionally talented in this area. So we do have a good website, thecompletecombatant.com. Our schedule's on there. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, we're on everything. I'm on Instagram as the Chief Chaos Controller. Julie Golub gave me that title. I really like it. It makes me very happy. So I post stuff on there occasionally. I have my own video channel on YouTube, which is going to be getting all my attention this year. I'm going to be posting everything that I talked about. I'm going to show you drills. I'm going to show you how to make progressive drills. I'm going to do everything I teach in class and give it to you so you can practice it. And then hopefully you'll come to class, because it's all going to change anyway. That's the nature of learning. We're going to move forward with it. But I'm going to make a bunch of videos. So I'd love to have you. Please tune into our website. Everything's the Complete Combatant, so it's easy to find. And we owe that all to Shelley Hill and not Brian Hill.
Yeah, you're so lucky to have her on your team. I wish I had a Shelley Hill.
I shanghaied her. Yep.
All right, let me find this comment. I know, Brent, you start it, then you unstart it, but I think it really was a question. Yeah. It says, I perceived a change or refinement in your training content, or maybe your philosophy between 22 and 23 coaching. You seem to have made a substantial step forward, integrating deeper mental and motivational phases of the shooting game. And the correct, yeah, thank you, Brent. If I'm correct, what caused that?
Very perceptive.
Yes.
I got skills. Not many people pick up on that. You are correct. Here's the reason. I decided, John Hoffman asked me, hey, owner of Filster, he said to me, what would you teach if you could teach anything? And I said, I'd teach a coaching class. And I started working on it and made this deliberate coaching class. And I didn't realize that I was going to be teaching my soul. I was going to be teaching the profound truths of who I am. And I found it incredibly vulnerable and terrifying and exhausting because I'd never done that before. I'm teaching how I think and how I approach things and how I do a diagnostic, but it also got me to grow, and it made me to pay attention. And then John, being the brilliant man he is, he's like, man, that's great. You made that class. He goes, but I don't care about coaching. He goes, what do you got for me? So then I had to make another class called the Inner Game of Shooting, which is the same class, but it is just about the athlete. And I termed it that because my first coaching book was The Inner Game of Golf, or The Inner Game of Tennis. Both of them are exceptional. And it really profoundly affected me. So it's an homage to do that. But it teaches people how to make progress. And I started working on these things. And then I became just a pistol coach. I was doing force on force. I was doing mindset classes. And now I just teach pistols because that's what people want me to do. I do rifles a little bit, but very infrequently. And mostly it's pistols. And I've gotten into this deep end of deliberate coaching, mindful practice. I feel a real opening in the environment for this with shooters.
Yeah.
Real craving for it. There was a real recognition on my part. I've been to the Olympic Training Center as a coach. I've been to several high-end coaching institutes, that it wasn't really existing the way it should. In the firearms industry, there was a lot of, let's call it pre-UFC martial arts style training. Very antiquated in some of its practices, very robotic. It didn't work exceptionally well. And it was, the vulnerability is what made the biggest change. I had to teach, and I had to examine my processes, and I had to really look deeply inside myself. And it made me grow in a way that sometimes I look at some of the things that I did, and I'm profoundly amazed, like I didn't do it. And the only thing I've ever been able to compare this to, Jordan Peterson talked about it when he was doing his 12 rules. He said he wrote at such a level that sometimes he goes back and looks at it and not sure he did the work. He was unsure of it. And that's what it feels like. The last 2 years, this is all I've been teaching. And it's been a clarifying process. Frankly, I'm old enough to not care what people think as much anymore. That's one of our great that somebody's going to see me for who I really am. And I wanted to serve at such a level, and I wanted people to stop having this suffering that wasn't meaningful, that they weren't getting where they wanted to get. And that's an incredibly perceptive question, and I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you noticed it. That makes me feel like it's in the right way. And it's taken me 2 years to kind of work through this. It's been really, really hard. It's hard work. And I also say there's great neuroscience emerging. People like Andrew Huberman, are doing great things. Green is doing great things. Stephen Coulter. So there's been a real connection to all these things at once because I've been questing. And my greatest accomplishment this year is I read Brian Enos's book for the 11th or 12th time in my career. And I finally understand what he's talking about. There's nothing new. You know, he was working on this in the 90s, but I understand how he's talking about vision and transitions, and it all started really making sense to me. And I'm able to apply a lot of the martial knowledge to pistol shooting. And I think
I
that's
have
it.
that book here.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it to most people.
You wouldn't?
Very zen-like. It's very zen-like. It's very deep. Yep. It is a wonderful book, and you won't get a lot of it the first time you read it, which is good. It should be kind of a litmus test. So if you keep going and you make it through the 3-year rule, I don't know if you guys know that, but you know, most people quit within 3 years of starting a new habit if they successfully negotiate 90 days, 9 months, and 3 years. But it just gives me a good feeling of where I am, you know. And he was training with Rob Latham. They were training partners, shooting at the highest level. And then he did something profoundly interesting. When he was done shooting, he quit and he just left. And he has a store now. And I subscribe to his newsletter, which is Zen Quotes. So if you're not of the Zen mindset, this may not be the book for you, but it's really good. And it's really interesting. And it's, you know, so a lot of people, when I say I'm teaching inner game of shooting, are like, is it like Brian Eno? So it's like, of course it's been influenced, but it's different, you know, in some ways. And then, you know, we're really trying to build the self-image in this industry in a different way, because that's what warriors truly need. They have to believe in themselves to win.
Yeah, that's what we forgot to talk about, Brian.
It's all right.
Whoopsie.
I can talk about it.
Well,
hey, listen, if you do the work and you create discipline and you're accurate in your goals and you're efficient, what will happen is your self-image will respond to that because it hears the truth, and it will never listen to anything that's not the truth. And you can tell yourself you look great, you shoot great, you're the best that ever lived, but your self-image doesn't believe that. It needs to be nurtured, it needs to be watered, it needs to be taken care of, and it needs to be measured, and it needs to be refined, and you need to go and perform and learn who you are. What are your strengths, weaknesses? And then you'll know how you'll react in every situation. And the constant in every fight is you. Don't worry so much about the bad guys. You're the only constant. And if you know who you are and you can master yourself, that's what self-image is. You will remember what it's like to shoot well, what it feels like to shoot well, what you can see. You'll make good decisions. And none of this will be a surprise to you because you've mastered yourself. How was that? Quick enough?
That was perfect. I mean, that could be a good ending to the show. Unless are there any final thoughts other than that you want to leave people with? Because I don't think you realize how much we all have to really pay attention to what you're saying, Brian, when you speak, because there's so much there. There's so much meat there that we're all just unpacking it mentally, trying to get through it. And this is the type of, you know, interview that you could watch 2 or 3 times and get something new out of it every time. So I think you forget that sometimes. So I'm reminding you.
I appreciate that.
There's so much. Yeah.
I'm trying to be the 3 coaches you need. So the easy, there's 3 coaches that everybody gets. The pass coach is the person that comes in and corrects your trigger press or your grip because you're already ready. Yeah. You're good to go.
Yeah.
And that's easy work because everybody prepared it. They did all the work before, and I just get to walk in and say, hey, do that. And then I look brilliant. And then there's the immediate coach. Yeah. Hey, what do we need to work on? Let's identify the goals. We can't fix everything right now, but let's find something you can work on. But then there's the future coach. So when you get to something and you're like, man, am I nuts? Am I completely off base? If you have a really good coach, they'll tell you that somewhere along the journey, you're going to see this. And it's okay. You're not alone, and you're not a weirdo, and you're not doing it by yourself. That there is a chance that you're on the right path right now. And that's what a future coach does for you. So that's what my job is to percolate the things enough so that you make a little correction now, You can do your practice. And then when you get to something profound, hopefully you'll come back and share it with all of us, and because you'll know you're not alone in that moment. And the loneliness of training sometimes is very difficult.
Definitely. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we go tonight? I don't think we missed anything. And I appreciate you taking this much time as well.
It's my pleasure. I love my work, and I love working with all of you. And if I can help, I'm going to do whatever I need to become the best version of the coach that you need. If it's not me, find somebody that can be that for you. If you are good at what you do, become a mentor and reach out and help somebody else. Even if you don't feel like you're sufficient to the task, or you feel like you have imposter syndrome, good. That's how you grow. If it's been thrust upon you, go ahead and step into it, kind of like a podcast, right? And then grow it, and then become that person that we all need you to do. And as always, measure, refine, and perform yourself. You are the target. As much as we talk about fighting other people, you'll do more damage to yourself than any opponent ever will if you're not careful. And I want you to live a life that's passionate and purposeful and seeks mastery and is full of curiosity, and you do it because you want to do it.
Well said, Brian Hill. I mean, if all of these people online right now were in person, we'd all be clapping. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? I can hear it. Yeah.
I appreciate their time. I'm honored, deeply honored. So.
Well, thank you for sticking with me, Brian. Thank you for saying yes when nobody knew who in the world I even was, and going on this journey with me, and believing in me. I really appreciate
You're
that.
Special. You're special.
Well, that's for sure.
I appreciate it. Me too.
We're all a little weird and we're all messy, and that's what I love about it. But we gotta stick together and support each other. So I appreciate you for that.
Always.
All right, so I don't want to belabor this too much longer. So let's wrap up for the evening. And just a couple of things here. I'm going to let you know who to expect for next week. And first, I want to thank all of the supporters who have, this makes me emotional. Thanks to all of you supporters who have supported Defenders Live on the locals community. I just dropped an early release of an interview that's really near and dear to my heart. It was with a good friend of mine named Lisa Stiers of Pac West Defense. And the video that I dropped last night on the locals channel is called The Truth About Domestic Violence. And Lisa shares a brave story of hers, and uses this story in her life and her experiences to help people. And really encourage you to go check that out. I don't think that you'll want to miss that, and you'll probably want to watch it to the very end. It's just one of those interviews, at least for me, that just was very powerful. So anyway, I encourage you to go check that out. That is on the Defenders Live community at locals.com. You can go to the Discover tab at locals.com and search up Defenders Live. That's where you can find that. And then next week, we're going to have Siobhan Thompson on with Throttle and Thrive. I actually swapped her around. So anyway, she switched weeks with somebody else. So she is going to be on next week, 2 days after Christmas. She is the founder of Throttle and Thrive, which is a men's only treatment facility, specially designed or specially helping veterans and first responders getting back on their feet. She's doing great work out there in California. She's an inspiration to many people because she stepped out of a very comfortable, successful career to do this. And she has a story of her own too that's very profound. So I'm looking forward to interviewing Siobhan next week. And so we'll see you again. And boy, thank you guys all for sticking with me for this long one tonight. I hope it was worth your time and that you got some value of it. We'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Until then, take care.